This week, the Academy awarded the Elliot L. Richardson Prize for Excellence in Public Service to Janet Yellen and Gary Locke, two longtime public servants with storied careers. During the award presentation, our honorees had an incredible conversation with Jenn White, host of NPR's 1A, about their own stories and the challenges of modern governing. I'm pleased to share that presentation with you as a bonus episode of the Management Matters podcast.
Well, thank you for this invitation to be in conversation with both of you and with all of you as well, especially at a time when public service is being challenged in ways that I think are both unexpected and difficult to understand at times. But you've both had to draw bright lines, ethical lines, institutional lines, personal lines. And I'm curious to first hear how in the face of pressure, you defined those boundaries for yourselves in your career of public service. Governor?
I think when we talk about governance, it's about serving the people. I think that has to be your highest objective. And the challenges that you face and the decisions that come along will vary. But then you have to have a core set of principles that guide you, whether it's your religious beliefs, your own background, the values that your family instilled in you, and also what you're trying to achieve. You'll be faced with ethical issues. You'll be faced with crises. And the question is, what are the parameters and what are the guiding principles that you use in all of these situations? When I think about governance and public service, good governance really depends on the public believing and having faith in the institutions and the decisions that are made by the institutions, grounded on high ethical standards, following procedures so that the decisions and policies aren't viewed as being done or made arbitrarily, and that you're really trying to serve the objectives and the desires and the aspirations of the people you're serving. It could be the business community, it could be litigants, it could be the general public or seniors or whatever, but they have to have faith that decisions are being made, and that means you have to be grounded in ethics. You have to be grounded in your own personal principles and following institutional norms.
Secretary Yellen?
So I certainly agree with Governor Locke that always bearing in mind, first and foremost, what is the mission of the organization, who are the people I'm trying to serve, and making sure that that becomes my guidepost for all of the analysis that's done to result in decisions that I can honestly say I believe serve the public interest. For me, what are the bright lines? You obey the law. Absolutely, period. No doubt about that. Ethics requirements. There should never be any conflict of interest or appearance of conflict of interest. And no matter how small the requirements, for me, it showed up first as I went to give a talk in Washington when I was a Fed governor. Someone to thank me, it was a university-sponsored event, thrust a sweatshirt in my arm, said thank you. I went back to my office. My assistant said, "What is that you have?" I said, "Oh, it's just a sweatshirt they gave me." Grabbed it from me, looked at the price tag, $15. That's above the gift limit. Well, you have two choices. You can buy it and pay the person who gave it to you, which didn't seem like something I was thought, or you can send it back with a note saying this violates your ethics guidelines. So I did the latter, although it was embarrassing to do so, but making sure that one always obeys the ethics requirements. And then, as importantly, one tells the truth. And that's true in dealing with colleagues, in dealing with staff, and in dealing with the public, that there can't be lies. One can't spin things, and it's a matter of ethics. And it's also, in many of the jobs I've had, a matter of effectiveness, that to be effective, the public, people operating in markets need to believe that you're doing honest analysis and telling the truth about what you see, including when you're uncertain and there are things you don't know. And if you've made a mistake, to me, part of being a good public servant is admitting publicly that you have made a mistake. This is something that seems politically not to be as popular as I wish it were. But I believe that's important in gaining the trust of the public and the people that you work with. But for me, Elliot Richardson clearly had an ethical dilemma that caused him to resign. I'm fortunate in my own career that there are not many nights that I found to be sleepless because I was tossing and turning, wondering, do I need to resign because I've been asked to do something that would violate really cross those bright lines I've set for myself. I think as I look back on it, one of the most challenging requirements or situations for me was when I served at the Council of Economic Advisors, and we were negotiating globally over climate targets. There were negotiations in Kyoto in 1997, and President Clinton committed to a very ambitious climate target for the United States to achieve 1990 emission levels by 2010. And these weren't very popular. This wasn't a very popular decision in Congress. I was told I had to testify on the economic impacts of what it would mean for households of trying to achieve these objectives. And politically, it was regarded as suicidal to say that this would be very expensive. And the problem with it I headed a unit that was responsible for economic analysis, was doing a lot of economic analysis. And the problem is that most economic analysis said, well, it could be very expensive, or at least expensive relative to what was politically acceptable. But whether or not it would be expensive really depended on how you went about doing it. And the way to make it not very expensive was to engage in something called international emissions trading. And I was strongly in favor of that. I thought it was a very desirable part of a sensible approach. But it wasn't that popular in the White House, and it wasn't that popular among some environmentalists. And I found myself in the position of being asked to say something to Congress that was potentially untruthful. Yeah. And I asked myself if I could do that or if I had to resign. And what I decided was that for me, it would be a requirement for me to do this, that this had to be, emissions trading had to be part of our policy. And if that was acceptable, then I could honestly testify that this is something we could easily take on. And if not, I'd have to resign. And I was fortunate that the White House agreed that that was something. But there are lines, and I think telling the truth, not spinning the truth, is an important part of public service.
It's interesting, Governor, when I hear Secretary Yellen's examples, you have one example that is high stakes, then you have another example that's seemingly low stakes. A sweatshirt that's $15. But when you're in public service, are any ethical decisions truly low stakes? If the difference between testifying before Congress and accepting a $15 sweatshirt, it feels like there's a lot of distance there. And yet that decision set a tone in her office about what was and was not acceptable.
I don't think there is such a thing as a small-scale ethical dilemma. You either have a set of rules and you abide by them, but if you don't, it's a sliding, slippery slope into gray areas. And, I can fudge on this one, I'll fudge on this one. And where does it stop? And so in my state of Washington, we're very fortunate that we have very strict public disclosure laws in terms of any candidate running for office, or even if you're holding a public position, you have to disclose all of your finances. Our campaign contribution limits are very, very low, and which really requires, and corporate contributions are limited as well. And so you're having to really rely on everyday people and the public to support you. And and then, of course, in the federal government, you have to divest all of your assets and stocks and things like that, and you cannot make decisions or engage in policy that affects something that you just recently had, or a position that you held, or a company that you work for. So I guess I've been very fortunate that there have always been very strong, bright lines. And there was never a question of ever crossing any of those, as small as they might be. In terms of the sweatshirt, I think what we were allowed to do is just donate it to a charity. And so, I mean, you save face with the organization that gave it to you, but how many sweatshirts do you want? So it's easy to do that. But I think ethics is very, very important, because if the public doesn't believe that government officials, whether it's a career person, school board member, elected official, or a cabinet person, if they don't believe that we're guided by ethics, then what are they to say to their own children? We then become a very bad role model. And I think that in today's society, ethics is more important than ever before, because the public needs to have faith in the decision making of government officials, and that they're motivated not by self-interest, but really the public interest.
I'm sure it's not news to anyone here this evening that trust in government right now is particularly fragile. A Pew Research poll from December 2025 suggests only 17% of Americans trust government in Washington to do what is right just about always or most of the time. That's the lowest result in 7 decades. Now, the news is brighter when we look at local government. A Gallup poll from November shows that 67% of Americans trust their local leaders to handle local issues. But clearly, both locally and nationally, there's a lot of work to do to restore Americans' trust in government. So, Secretary, what have you learned about what it takes to rebuild trust, not through rhetoric, but through actions and the decisions you make as a leader?
First of all, it seems to me that decisions really must be grounded in solid analysis, in which, in the positions that I've held, politics don't enter that analysis, and there needs to be a clear description to the public, explanation to the public of what are you trying to achieve. Why is this in the public interest? How did you come to this decision? What are the things that you weighed? What are you uncertain about? What are the trade-offs that were involved in this decision? And one has to be honest with the public and not try to spin decisions or facts that bear on the decisions that have been made. And to show competence, and day in and day out to be perceived as somebody who is working hard in the public interest, trying to make honest decisions which are explained, and carrying out the duties that have been assigned to you and your organization.
If I could just follow up on that, I guess government has, and agencies have, a huge mandate and a broad set of responsibilities. I think it's very important, if we're trying to restore faith or increase faith in government or trust in government, that government needs to understand, first of all, that there'll never be enough money to do it all. The wish list will always exceed the available dollars, and therefore it's important to set priorities and to try to do a few things really, really well, and especially in the areas that are of concern to the public. And at the same time, and those might take a long time to achieve. And that's where Secretary Yellen says, we need to explain and talk to the people and let them know what's going on. But I also think that there are projects and initiatives that can be taken on a very short-term level, where the public can actually see results. And they can see, that's why I think local government enjoys greater respect among the people, because they see things happening at the local level. And so engaging in short-term projects that are very visible is very important. Snow removal, all right? All right. Or government efficiency. How long do you have to stand in line to renew your driver's license? Or how long does it take for appeals of legal appeals or administrative appeals on tax issues? Those things you can really influence, and the public notices. At the same time, you're working on these really tough issues with a lot of communication, and again, focusing on the priorities, on issues that really matter to everyday people.
Governor, I'm really curious, as someone who also served at the state level, how much of that requires a deeper level of civic engagement? And because what I've encountered over the past, I would say, year or so, is people sort of getting a civics 101 lesson in real time. We did a series early in 2025, just giving a basic explanation of what federal agencies do. And so many people had no idea. So as someone who has spent his career in public service, part of that as an elected official, how do you bring the American people closer to the work you do and get them engaged more deeply in civic life?
I think you have to go out to the people. And certainly in the state of Washington, we had town halls throughout every part of the state. And we would actually bring our entire cabinet. And we'd get things like Costco to donate food to the people and hot dogs and drinks and things like that. And so people would come up and they take the microphone and they just complain and talk about the issues that they had, problems with the bureaucracy. And we'd have a cabinet official right there and key staff from each of the agencies. Okay, go talk to him, talk to her. We'll try to figure it out. And we went throughout the state doing that. And so you have to reach out to the people. You have to let them know that government is not some distant organization in some capital that's 300 miles away, and that government does care about you and your issues, your dreams, your aspirations, your fears, your anxieties. You also have to be very honest that some things we can't solve. I'm sorry, that's a tough situation, but that's not something that government can do. Maybe a nonprofit or something, but we can't solve everybody's problems. And I also think it's important that government officials really talk in language that people understand. I think oftentimes we use so many acronyms, we get into such, bureaucratic jargon. I'm third generation in the United States, but I'm first generation born in the United States. So I was always trying to explain things as if I were talking to my mother, who doesn't really understand much English, and trying to explain concepts to people that they could readily understand. And that's how I think that's how we increase the connection between government and people.
You've both been in leadership at times when the world was watching. You carried enormous responsibilities. And Secretary, I'm curious to hear first from you, what kept you grounded during those times when the pressure was high and when you knew the stakes were high too?
Well, when you mention when the stakes were high, two examples that immediately come to mind for me were the financial crisis in 2008, when it looked like we could have a meltdown of the entire U.S. and possibly global financial system and end up with damage to individuals, their job prospects, their livelihoods, their ability to keep a roof over their heads. Could have been as bad as the Great Depression. And then the other really stressful episode that comes to mind for me would be the pandemic and its aftermath, when unemployment hit levels that were double digit, when people were losing their businesses and their homes and faced foreclosure. These are tremendously stressful times. And you say your question was what kept me grounded. I guess what kept me grounded was, first of all, commitment to the mission, that I knew we had tools that if we gave it our all and we applied them, we might not be able to fix everything, but we could make a huge difference. And nothing mattered more than giving it our absolute all. And knowing that I wasn't in it alone. that I was part of organizations filled with committed, talented public servants, our civil service, people who had taken on these jobs precisely to be able to perform for the public and be of help in the most trying of circumstances, and that we were all in it together. We were all going to give it our absolute best effort. It was going to be frightening, but we were going to do everything we could. Someone in the middle of the financial crisis sent me a poster. It was the British poster, says, "Keep calm and carry on." And I had that framed and I put it in my office. And on the most trying days when we thought we're going to lose a major financial institution, it's going to blow up and credit is going to dry up for the entire economy if we don't figure this thing out before Monday morning, and there's a run on a major bank, the best we can do is give it our absolute all. We have to keep calm. We have to carry on. One of the things I found most satisfying and most gratifying about public service is the people who are part of organizations like the Fed, like the Treasury, the Council of Economic Advisors. These are very dedicated, mission-oriented, capable, passionate people who know in these trying times, this is what I'm in it for. I have the training to be able to help. I can't fix everything, but we're going to hold hands and we're going to do the best we possibly can. And it is also a very bonding experience. And I think it brings out the best in people. And, you try your best, and that's the best that's humanly possible. And I felt that's all I can do, and that's what I will do.
Governor, what about you?
Well, I've had a couple of instances that I can recall where everybody was watching. Some, very short term and some very long term. I think one of the toughest decisions I had to make, very lonely decision, was whether or not to allow the death penalty to be carried out or allow the execution to occur for a person who had committed some really heinous crimes. What was interesting is that the clergy were opposed to the execution, but he wanted, the criminal wanted to be executed and was not opposed to the death penalty. And so I had very mixed feelings about the death penalty. I'd also been a prosecutor, had once prosecuted a death penalty case, and wasn't sure that we should be having the death penalty. But anyway, it was very lonely, very, very lonely decision. And up to the last hours, I was, with some folks, cabinet members or key advisors. But then I had to go off by myself. And I had to just draw upon my own values, my own faith, and the purpose of being in office. And so that was a really tough decision. The other decision of certainly not of the magnitude that the Secretary has faced in terms of the world economy and people's livelihoods was the 2010 census at the Commerce Department. When I came in, President Obama had come in, and the 2010 census was a year out. We were told, I didn't realize just the problems that the Census Bureau was facing, but everyone said it was going to be an unmitigated disaster. Just before we came in, the Census Bureau had decided that instead of if you don't send in your census questionnaire, fill it out, after a while, we hire people part-time to go knocking on your door and with clipboard, paper, and pencil, getting the information, how many people live here, their ages, their gender, et cetera, et cetera. And then it's sent back to a processing facility and all tabulated. And then you have paper and pencil in terms of what house you're supposed to go to. And then they have to have timesheets to figure out how many hours you worked and how much you would get paid. And someone came up with a brilliant idea. Why don't we have handheld computers like FedEx and UPS, and we'll just punch all this information in. And so the previous administration spent almost $1 billion on this project, and the handheld computers did not work.
Oh my God.
All right. So here we are coming in, and we got to go back to paper and pencil, but they didn't know where they were going to send the forms and where were we going to who's going to send out the maps and the clipboards and everything? And then we had groups calling for a boycott of the census on the left and the right. And all these different groups wanted more money for their ethnic groups to advertise and promote. White House said, it's going to be an unmitigated disaster. You got to take the fall on this. So we did a lot of planning, had a lot of meetings, oversaw it, comprehensively and very strenuously and almost obsessed over it. In the end, it was the most successful census in U.S. history, the most accurate census in U.S. history, and we came in 20% under budget for a savings of a couple $2 billion.
Okay, so during that process, though, when you've been told everything's going to fall apart,
and you're going
to hold the pieces, right? So what or who did you turn to at that time? Because you still had to go to work every day. You still had to try to execute it, even though everyone was planning for it to fail.
We had meetings almost every week in my office with the career people and some of the political people. There are very few political people in the Census Bureau. And so we had our office going over these things and just really looking at what will go wrong. What are the critical decision points and times when decisions have to be made? And are we accounting for the information? I mean, we're going to be flooded with information. We wanted to be sure that people did not second guess the information. There's no time to say, well, we need another study. We need to double check the figures. So we said ahead of time, what will we look at? And do we have confidence that the set of information that we will receive will be the right set of information? So we had a big debate on what we would consider a year from now, 8 months from now. Because we said, once those decisions are made, or once the data comes in, we have to rely on it. We don't have time for second guessing. And then we also just try to be as creative as possible, going out to the communities, working with the faith-based communities, going out to the cities, having competition by mayors, saying, wow, Seattle, you're lagging behind Philadelphia in terms of the rate of participation. Are you going to allow that to happen? So we really did a lot of community engagement and also meeting with elected officials throughout the country.
But it was your people. That's what I'm hearing you say. It was your people.
It was our people.
Yeah.
Really. And
No. So,
and then also having money in reserve and knowing that if you have to make a quick decision at the end, we have something set aside that will enable us to address it.
Yeah. The current leader of OPM recently talked to the National Academy of Public Administration about wanting to make public service more attractive to younger people. But we also have to acknowledge, as it has been several times this evening, that it's been a very difficult year for public servants. According to OPM, 300,000 federal workers left the government by the end of 2025. That's through layoffs, retirements, buyouts, resignations. So what is the pitch you would make to young people today about why a life of public service is worth it, locally or at the federal level? Secretary?
First of all, you get to work on some of the most important issues that affect the welfare of the public in the United States and around the globe. Issues concerned with economic well-being, with issues like climate change and whether or not we're going to be able to, how we can address that, inequality, health security, labor standards. The government just has tools and policies that, if well implemented and executed, can make such an enormous difference to the well-being of Americans and people around the world. You know that you'll be part of something that you can feel proud of what the work that you're doing and the contribution that you're making to society through public service. You can be sure that you're going to work with people whose company you're going to enjoy, with whom you'll have a great deal in common, that you can feel part of an organization, that you can feel proud of the work that it does and the people that you work with, that you'll get interesting assignments if you show a lot of initiative, or even early in your career, you can be given very challenging and interesting assignments. And you learn a great deal, and it helps develop your sense of judgment. And public service is immensely rewarding. I think when people graduate from school, people ask me, what should I look for in a career? I say to them, first of all, figure out what you're passionate about, what you want to spend your life making a contribution toward. What do I want to do? And then try to find an organization where the people are similarly motivated and they share your passion. And it's an organization where talent is appreciated, it's rewarded, and you can feel good about the work you do and the people you do it with. And I think public service has all of that. Now, over the last year or so, to see public servants really torn down and very badly treated, resulting in all of the losses that you described. To me, our civil servants are people engaged in public service. This is a form of capital of our society. This is a talent bank that America benefits from utterly enormously. And to see people with the wealth of experience that they have forced to leave government and their contributions not being appreciated. Hopefully this will change in the future.
Governor, I'm thinking about that recent college graduate the Secretary mentioned, or the one who's contemplating, what do I do when I'm finished with my degree? I thought I wanted to work in public service. What would you say to them?
I say to them that if you really care about the issues affecting your community or the nation or the world, you have to get involved. If you really care about whether it's climate change, as the Secretary mentioned, or income inequality, human services, economic development, public safety, education, if you really care about the issues, then you have an opportunity and almost a responsibility to get in there to help make the decisions. Otherwise, someone will make the decisions for you, and you're on the outside and you can't complain. And government is there to serve the people. People look to government in times of floods, tornadoes, natural disasters, fires, pandemics, tough economic situations. And so being in government, you can actually improve the lives of the people in your community. And that's a noble calling. That's a really noble calling. It's something that we need more people engaged in. And it's not necessarily running for office or even working for the government. It could be serving on a board or commission. It's really just getting engaged in your community and really thinking about the long-term interest of the community and serving the needs of the people.
You know, as I've been listening to you both speak this evening, your commitment to public service is clear. Your commitment to the people with whom you shared this work is clear. You maintained a very deep sense of purpose across your respective careers. But you also faced challenges. There were times when you perhaps were not aligned with the administration you were serving under. What helped you maintain that sense of purpose, even in the difficult times, even when you were perhaps sacrificing personally because of what the work demanded? How did you hold on with that clarity of purpose, Governor?
Well, it goes back to one's core values. Why are you in government to begin with? And hopefully it's not for self-advancement, personal enrichment, re-election, fame, or glory. For me, it was just really trying to fix things and make things better for other people. Knowing that you're not always going to get it right, knowing that not everyone's going to agree with you. I mean, when I won with 60% of the vote, someone reminded me that if you're in front of an audience of 100 people, 60 people like you and support you, but 40 right there don't. All right? They don't support you. So they're really skeptical about you and looking at you with jaded eyes, perhaps. And if people win with 55% and they say that's a landslide, just think about it, or 53%, that's barely half the room and one side and half on the other side. So you have to really also approach it by saying, I have to make the decision I think is really best, serving the mission, best for the people, even if it means it's going to hurt my personal advancement because I'm speaking out, or I may not get reelected. And I think that we have to approach these jobs with a sense of urgency, knowing that our time may be limited, whether election or administrations or what have you. But at the same time, you also have to try to balance and have balance in your life so that you can, it's almost like a marathon. It's with urgency, but you can't go so fast, destroy your own personal life, your family life, because if that is in shambles, then you're not effective as a government official or a public servant. So there has to be urgency but balance, and you have to really not think about your own, what the consequences to yourself in terms of your professional advancement or career in really trying to address the common good.
So, Secretary, urgency, balance, but I'm also hearing perhaps humility.
Yeah, I think humility is important, that we not try to convey that we're perfect and have all of the answers, but that we are doing everything humanly possible and using all of the tools that we have to do everything humanly possible to address challenges like unemployment, a financial crisis, economic problems, inequality, a pandemic and its consequences. That, again, the mission and the knowing that you're part of an organization that really has tools that you can use to improve things, and wanting to make sure that you have done everything humanly possible to improve things and address important public issues that really affect the welfare of Americans, and that you've tried to be as innovative as you can, that you've worked with people, encouraged them to do blue sky thinking, that you're open to new ideas, you welcome them, that you try to come up with every approach you possibly can. You know, some of them may not work, some of them may bring criticism. Certainly during the financial crisis, some of the things the Fed did were not universally applauded. You know that you're focused on the public good and the welfare of the public, and it's tremendously motivating. And as I said before, the sense of camaraderie that you have with other individuals who are working alongside you, that sharing of responsibility and mission really enables one to carry on for a long time working on things. And of course, one's family is critical to being able to hang in there. And as the governor said, you can't work 24/7, month after month after month without taking some break. For me, I always knew I would be more effective if I got a good night's sleep. and no matter how bad things got, I always tried to get a decent night's sleep. And it's very interesting work. And sometimes when the most difficult times, it's also the most challenging, interesting work that you can't imagine that you would be faced with challenges that are as complex as the ones that you have to deal with. And then it's satisfying if you can come up with an idea that seems like it will be helpful. So it is tremendously engaging work, and can be in it for the long run.
This evening has reminded us that principled leadership matters, that strong institutions are built by people who choose integrity, service, and the public good, especially in the challenging moments. Those values are at the heart of the Academy's mission, and they are what we are proud to honor tonight. Management Matters is a presentation of the National Academy of Public Administration, produced by Lizzie Alwan and Matt Hampton, and edited by Matt Hampton.